Local Law 97, I'm going to ask you what that means for the layperson in a second here. But how does that tie into building energy strategy and ultimately what you do?
Local Law 97, you need to decarbonize your building. And essentially what that means is lowering your usage. And one thing by doing that is tightening the envelope, which is essentially installing good performing windows, lighting, roofing, insulation. But we were obviously talking specifically about windows. And as early as 2019, nobody really knew what Local Law 97 was. But Local Law 97 as a whole, again, was reducing the carbon footprint. We came in as the window.
Many building owners think of windows as aesthetic upgrades, but in cities like New York, they can make or break your carbon compliance strategy under laws like Local Law 97. As energy regulations tighten and decarbonization deadlines approach, window performance is no longer just a design detail. It's a strategic decision that impacts operating costs, emissions targets, and long-term asset value. In this episode, I'm joined by Hugo Ramirez, Vice President of the Window Replacement Division at Adler Windows, with deep experience in manufacturing, building envelope performance, and industry leadership through organizations like the International Institute of Building Enclosure Consultants. Hugo brings a practical lens to how windows influence real-world energy outcomes. We'll speak about how high-performance window systems fit into Local Law 97 compliance strategies, what surprises engineers about the manufacturing side of performance glazing, and how firms can leverage utility credits to offset upgrade costs. If you're leading projects in today's evolving regulatory and technology landscape, this conversation will help you think differently about window specification, retrofit strategy, and long-term building performance so you can make smarter, future-ready decisions on your next project. But before we jump in, I want to tell you about AEC PM Connect, where AEC professionals explore how technology and innovation can transform project management, performance, and leadership. The event will take place on June 10th, 2026 at the Forest Gate Country Club in New Jersey. You can register now at aecpmconnect.com, and I hope to see you there soon. With that, let's jump into today's episode. It's now time for our conversation of the week with Hugo Ramirez. Hugo, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here today.
Excellent. And Hugo, I think you're sitting in a pretty unique seat, and I'm excited to chat with you about a couple of things here today. So let's jump right in. So Hugo, I know you're big on windows, building envelope performance, which is a little bit of a niche subject. How did you get involved, and then how did your career evolve from there?
Great. So great question. So I'll kind of take you back to childhood. So born and raised in New York. I'm a first-generation immigrant. My parents immigrated here from Colombia in the late 60s. So I grew up in Queens. Father was a cost accountant. Mother was a executive assistant. And in the late 70s and 80s, my father started to buy real estate in New York. So at a very young age, 8, 9, 10 years old, we would go through the apartment buildings and renovate them. So ripping roofs off, ripping windows out, ordering windows. So at a very young age, I would actually go to a window manufacturer in Queens to order windows from a Chinese manufacturer. So you have my father speaking to me in Spanish. I'm speaking to them in English. She's speaking back to me in broken English, and I'm kind of ordering these windows over the counter. So at a very early stage of acquisition, my father would literally pull out the windows and put new windows in for energy efficiency. So that was like early teenage years. I went to school for finance and international business, right? So I was a finance guy, business banker, JP Morgan for a few years. Then I got recruited by a Japanese American private equity group. And so I moved out to Japan, Tokyo, Japan for 4 years. And what we did was due diligence on the acquisitions for ski resorts, hotel properties, and manufacturing companies. So again, real estate, finance in the area. 2008, the market crashed. So I came back to the States, no banking jobs, got back into real estate. So what I did was I was buying short sales, right? So foreclosures directly from the bank, engineering, financial engineering, those friends and family capital. We'd buy these homes, renovate them, and resell them. One of the first things we would do is rip out the windows and put new windows in for lipstick or curb appeal. In 2010, I got introduced, and this is kind of where that window building envelope kind of comes into play on a career perspective. In 2010, I got introduced to a window manufacturing company to consult, help them in the financials, go-to-market strategy, manufacturing essence. Then I got introduced to a window installation company. All I did was install. I grew that company about 10 times in the short months of like 12 to 14 months. We grew it in about 3 years, sold it, and then came to work with Adler Windows, which is a larger window installer in New York City. What they were doing at the time was roughly $13 million in sales, and they needed another principal to kind of come in and expand the market into high-end residential. And so that kind of brought me into architects, engineers, consultants, growing that. And then currently now we're about $60-70 million worth of business. So kid from Queens, travel the world, doing financial modeling, engineering, JVs, came back to the States, got back into Windows, and now kind of that's my bread and butter is Windows and building enclosure.
That's quite the trajectory, Hugo, and kind of I'd say beats right the my boring engineering, right, straight and narrow career path. So you've had a lot of great experience, and it's brought you back to Windows essentially. That you started when you were 8-9 years old, basically bartering deals. What's that? Three separate languages between your dad, you, and the shop.
Absolutely. Yep.
It's pretty amazing. So then let's bring it back to building performance. So local law 97, I'm going to ask you what that means for the layperson in a second here. But how does that tie into building energy strategy and ultimately what you do?
Great question. So local law 97 has been around for quite some time now. That came out pre-COVID, right? So 2019, 2018, 2020, we were aligning ourselves as a window manufacturer installer with consultants in the city to really go to the owner operators and say, hey, local law 97, you need to decarbonize your footprint, your building. And essentially what that means is lowering your usage. And one thing by doing that is tightening the envelope, which is essentially installing good performing windows along other things, right? Lighting, roofing, insulation. But we were obviously talking specifically about windows. And as early as 2019, nobody really knew what local law 97 was. You essentially get fines if you don't meet the criteria. And there's different benchmarks along the way. And I'll keep this super high level. It can get really technical. But local law 97 as a whole, again, was reducing the carbon footprint. We came in as the window individuals or window consultants to help the owner operator financial, right? To make the model and understand what the ROI is on the investments. But it wasn't just about the windows. We were saying, hey, it's a holistic approach. There's windows, facade, roofing, insulation. Before you change your mechanicals, let's figure out if you can put a tighter envelope, you can reduce your mechanicals. And that was the conversation. And it kind of went really well until COVID hit, right? Then COVID was 2020. No owners wanted to spend any money or invest any money in their buildings. They were losing their tenants. They couldn't occupy spaces. So it kind of went on the shelf for a little while. Fast forward, 2024, kind of tail end of COVID, 2025. And so now local law 97 is still a big thing. The challenge that we're having with owner operators in the city is they still don't have the financial capacity to make large capex or large investments back into their buildings. So fast forward, local law 97 and the utility companies here in New York City, utility companies are essentially subsidizing or funding owners to, again, reduce the carbon, reduce the energy so they can reduce the usage. And so they're subsidizing some of these window installations. And what that means is better performing product. Let's say it's $1,000 for a window, which is not the case in New York City, but $1,000 for a window, you get a subsidy from utility or NYSERDA. That window now becomes $750. So that becomes a lot more amenable for owners to actually do and comply to local law 97. Does that make sense?
And I think it does. And the utility companies obviously have a vested interest. Well, and it's interesting, right? Because you might think, well, don't they want their customers spending more on whatever utility they're providing? But obviously they have some sort of other incentive, right?
They do. So there's usage, right? So there's not that they don't have unlimited use of energy to provide to the grid or to the public. Therefore, they are trying to understand if they can reduce the usage in certain locations by doing X, whether it's lighting or window upgrades or insulation upgrades, they can reduce the grid and provide energy to other areas.
And here, I think windows might be overlooked because right, if you're just a regular person, you're watching TV, what's the first thing you see? Okay, we got to insulate your walls, insulate your attic. So
in the AEC industry, skilled project managers are the backbone of success. EMI's AEC PM certification offers tailored training, ongoing support, and exclusive access to premium content that keeps your team sharp and effective. From foundational training to advanced leadership tools, set your team apart with certified growth. Learn more at aecpm.com. That's aecpm.com.
how do windows factor into broader decarbonization strategies under Local Law 97, and then where do firms often underestimate their impact? And maybe you can expand a little bit on like all of these components in the building envelope and then kind of where windows fit in more specifically.
Sure. So when people see a building, their first approach is energy usage, which is typically the mechanicals, right? So they think, and I say they in a broad term, they think you should upgrade your mechanicals so then it can be more efficient. The reality is in a lot of places, whether it's residential or commercial here in New York or even New Jersey or Connecticut, where you have these commercialized buildings, you're losing a lot of your energy through the windows or through the walls. And so that's kind of where it becomes to making the envelope tighter. And that's where that term comes, make it tighter. Essentially what's happened is you can upgrade your mechanicals, have the best, you can have a Ferrari as a mechanical system in your building, but literally the gasoline is being poured out of the windows. Like you're just losing all that energy out of the window. And it might not be the window is failing, it just might not be closing properly. So you might not need to change all your windows. You might need to tune up your windows or re-glaze systems or re-insulate systems. So the first conversation is, hey, let's take a consultative approach to the entire envelope and see exactly what's happening, because you might not need to change all your windows, right? So kind of going back to your question is, what's the first thing? Change the mechanicals, change the windows. What we say is, hey, let's have a conversation. You might not need to change your mechanicals just yet. You might not need to change your windows just yet. Let's maybe upgrade your windows or upgrade your glazing right now. So we can maybe geek out a little bit. There's some really cool technologies out there when it comes to glass and thermally broken products. There's something called vacuum insulated glass, which essentially performs 4 to 10 times stronger than your traditional clear glass. However, right now it's pretty expensive when you compare it to a regular piece of glass. Now there's also something called thermally broken systems, which essentially it's breaking the aluminum from one side from the outside to the inside. There's a thermal break, and that reduces the transfer of heat and cold, right? And it also helps for acoustical properties. And then we can also talk about baseline, right? There's a lot of buildings or even a lot of old homes that have single pane glass. You can really just upgrade that single pane glass with double pane glass, which essentially is just extra insulation. So there's a couple things that are theming out with Local 97, and what I can say is with Local 97 is really bringing the consultants as early as possible before you cut a big check to the window installer or to the mechanical guy, is really have all the consultants come together and really understand what the wholesome approach is for not just today, but for the next 10, 20, 30 years of how to model out this building.
That's a great segue into our next question, Hugo, because there's the building physics question, right? Like how this thing moves, how energy moves, through the building and the building envelope. And then there's the financial piece, right? The show me the money. So how do you help project teams and owners think about window repair or replacement as part of a long-term strategy rather than just a capital expense? Because on one hand, you want to do what's right per right laws and whatever your views are there on energy, but also it needs to make sense financially.
So great question. So that comes back to how to get into windows, right? So at first, I'm a business guy. I'm a finance guy. I'm a real estate. I'm an entrepreneur, right? So windows is just kind of a vehicle of what my day-to-day livelihood is. But when we get approached from owners or architects and engineers is, okay, let's figure out what's really going on and what your expectations are and what you want to do with the asset. Is it hold it? Is it flip it? Right? What is the strategy here with the building? I was having a call this morning with a big owner operator in the city here, and it's really understanding. And this is more on the pre-acquisition side. Is okay. So here's the asset. What do we need to do to acquire this building? What's going to be the dollars and cents that I need to invest on the facade, right? So that's one conversation. The another conversation is, okay, I have an existing asset. What should we do with it? And I'm always like, okay, time out. Let's pump the brakes. Let's figure out exactly what's going on with your building and what the strategy is. You have existing tenants. Great. The lease is still up for another 7 years. So you don't have to replace the windows. Let's figure out how we're going to strategize. Let's just go in there and tune up the windows, maybe reseal some of the windows and swap out some glass. That's your baseline. And that can get you a performing envelope. Like, you don't need from day one to swap out the windows, unless, again, they're falling out the building. That's a whole different conversation. But most buildings in New York City right now, if they have, I'm putting up quotes here, they have good windows. They might not be great. They might not be terrible, but if you've been maintaining your building as a proper landlord in the city, you have decent windows. Now, if you take a decent window and, again, swap out the glass or swap out the gasketing, you'll have a better performing system that can get you to from point A to point B. If you want to go from A to Z, then that conversation, Nick, is really to pull out the windows, re-insulate the opening, put a really high performance window, and that will get you from A to Z really fast. But again, that's dollars and cents. It's really kind of understanding, how do we underwrite the deal? If I'm putting X amount of dollars, and will I be able to get that out? So looking, like you said, like looking at these windows from a landlord perspective or from a lot of tenants' perspective, if it just has clean glass and they can see out their window and they're not freezing in the window, most tenants, whether it's commercial or residential, they're fine. They're not really looking for a splash unless you go to a different demographic, which is a Class A building. That's a different conversation. But for most Class B buildings in the city with a working window that's operable and that has good energy efficiency, you're fine.
And it all just starts with clearly understanding your goals as an owner or an operator or whatever, wherever you're coming from, and then acting accordingly, just to simplify.
Totally fine. Like, whether it's the architect or the engineer or the owner, it's really understanding where they are baseline and where they're looking to go. And we'll take, again, a super consultative approach. I don't need to sell windows today, right? It's really understanding what you need as an owner today. Maybe it's a quick service or quick parts. We can get you incentives. We can help you get incentives from the utility companies just to replace parts and to replace some glass. So that's the conversation. And then maybe in year 2 or year 3, we're really phasing into a replacement strategy. Maybe it's the front facade because you want a better curb appeal. And then we'll work on the rear of the buildings, or then we'll work at the upper floors. So there's definitely a strategy in place. We'll work through the CapEx, we'll work through the financial models, and really understand what the best approach would be for that.
And Diego, bringing it back to the architects and engineers. So what tends to surprise designers about the manufacturing side of high performance windows? And then how does that actually translate to performance in the field?
Great. So architects, love engineers. I feel terrible for them at sometimes because they're expected to know everything about everything. And the reality is the architect is responsible to know about the whole envelope or the lighting or the controls or the MEP, right? So most architects learn it on the job, especially when it comes to windows. And so we are the friendly consultant to help the architect build the specification or understand whether they're going to get a window fabricated locally, or maybe out of the Midwest or out of South America or out of Eastern Europe, depending on what the use is or what type of window they want. So very early on, and there's different levels of performance, right? There's baseline performance where you need to meet that 0.40 U value for New York City, right? That's a baseline. And then if you go lower, then you'll get a better energy performing product. And that, again, goes into the wholesome approach or the strategy for that owner. But again, going back to the architect, there's architects that are really strong in the envelope conversation. There's architects that are really strong on the design aspect. And if you put those two together and we come in as a consultant on the project and help them understand A, B, C, good, better, best, what's the ROI, what's the initial expenditure on this, and then what what's the best use for the occupancy, right? So we'll kind of run through that with the architect. We also help them draw it. We do mock-ups. We do probes, right? So essentially a probe is we take out a piece out of the existing window. We really figure out what's going on the inside of that opening. We'll build a mock-up, right? So that's a sample window that will install it. So now everybody can touch and feel what this window that everybody wants to put into that opening. So architects are a huge critical component to doing these evaluations, doing the design, doing the filing, and then really usually here in New York, the architect is the conduit between us and the owner. Or if we're the first conversation, we always recommend it. There's a consultant, an architect, and an engineer to evaluate exactly the windows that are going into the building.
And I think, Hugo, from an education perspective, one really great organization, and this is actually, part of the story about how we met, is IIBEC, so the International Institute of Building Enclosure Consultants, for anyone who's not familiar. So can you just give a little bit of background on the organization and then tell us more about how the conversation about the building envelope is evolving based on all the work you've done, particularly with the Metro New York chapter?
Great. So I'm coming off presidency. So I'm the past president of IIBEC, or IIBEC, as some people know it, the International Institute for Building Enclosure Consultants. It is a non-for-profit. It's an education-based organization that essentially educates architects, engineers, property managers, owner-operators, and different vendors that support the envelope. And what we did here what we are currently doing here in New York is, again, education-based. It's different manufacturing companies that have new technology, different glazing companies that have different technologies. It's coming up with the local law 97s or the 126s, which is parking garages inspections, right? So really educating the architects and engineers here in the city to understand how do they arm themselves to go to market in the different components, right? So IIBEC does anything from a webinar, AIA accredited courses, IIBEC accredited courses. They'll do in-person classroom style education. We'll do panel discussions with the Department of Buildings or big owner operators in the city to kind of understand what their need is, what are the architects and engineers providing. We'll also do fundraising activities like golf outings to make it, just not super education, but like bring people together to talk about different things that are happening in their office, how to put different deals together, make people comfortable on a personal level. Because if you have that personal connection, that personal relationship, to then work on a deal is that much better and that much stronger and that more positive on the onset of projects. So IIBEC, I came to IIBEC really looking for that camaraderie within the envelope space. I couldn't really find anything. There's a lot of organizations here in New York City, but they're not really envelope. And so IIBEC was the platform where we chose right before COVID. I got introduced to the association. So 2018, 2019, saw that it was very unique. Love the individuals. I knew some people that I did deals with, did different projects with. And then I came in to help it grow and flourish. And here we are, fast forward 5-6 years. And it's a tremendous platform, not just for architects and engineers, but even a property manager that wants to understand who are the people that are really putting these envelope deals together. Right now, there's office to residential conversions, which are huge in New York City, very technical. There's a handful of architects, there's a handful of engineers, and there's a handful of owners that are really doing these deals. So if you want to get into that space, well, that's a room to kind of learn from. But it's a great platform. Thanks for bringing that up, Nick.
Absolutely. And Hugo, the one that the event that we worked together on, so this was last September, it's IIBEC's annual symposium, and the topic was on artificial intelligence. So tying that back to really the theme of this podcast. So as AI and digital modeling tools become more common in AEC, how do you see data influencing window specification and lifecycle decision making? So windows, right, but the entire envelope too.
Yeah, great. So great segue, Nick. So one of my initiatives last year, which 2025, was to incorporate AI into building technologies and building enclosure, right? So there was a fact that we saw that, construction was the latest adopter of AI technologies, artificial intelligence. So I said, okay, let's bridge the gap. Let's put together some really cool panels. Let's bring in some really dynamic speakers like yourself. So thank you for joining that day and helping us all through 2025 building the event, which was a bear. But really kind of bringing that element of AI, artificial intelligence, to the people that are not really looking at it, right? And so I use it at a very elementary level, like a grain of salt on a day-to-day basis. But really the intent was, how do we use AI to read these facades, right? So there's different technologies out there to read a facade and where the failures are, and then map it, and then see it again in a year or 2 years to kind of see where there's additional failures or what has been repaired. So that's baseline in our industry, and we actually saw that kind of technology about 2 or 3 years ago, and that was cutting edge, and now it's kind of like baseline for our industry right now. Another one that we saw at the event was like punch list writing, right? So there's somebody running, and sorry, I'll take a step back. Punch list is when you're tail end of a job or tail end of a construction project, that trade is walking around the building to see if there's any open items. And so we used AI to specifically go around, take a picture, speaking to a microphone on what needs to get done or what's open. And then that automatically uses AI to spit out a document that then gets produced to and given to the client or the GC or the CM, right? When it comes to windows and modeling, yeah, so we are trying to get ahead of the curve with regard to specification writing. We're using AI to read through specs for target words to help us on the estimating side. We're using AI technology here on the estimating side to read blueprints to do window takeoffs. And it's not perfect. It's not 100%, but it helps. It gives us another set of eyes as our real human are doing the takeoffs or the estimating. We're also seeing newer AI technologies, again, to oversee drawings to help output and speed up shop drawings. And shop drawings are the architectural drawings of what manufactured goods are, whether it's windows, doors, or any other type of product is what you need for shop drawings. So we're starting to see that a lot more and more. And it has been like a race to get that best technology, whether it's in-house here at Adler Windows or within IIBEC, IIBEC, so we can help the technical architects and engineers in the city.
And as part of that mission, Hugo, and I think that was really well stated in a nice summary of the 2025 event, I understand IBEC's coming back in 2026. Do you mind giving us a sneak preview of what's to come later this year?
Yeah, so what we're trying to build out those days now. So we are putting together some sort of date in June or July, so that's still getting hammered out, where we're trying to see what people put into. Okay, let me take a step back, Nick, right? So you have this phenomenal panel, everybody's energized, everybody's like super motivated to go out and use AI, and what happens? Maybe 20% of the people use it, and then 80% of the people go back to do what they normally do, right? And then you have kind of your lurkers, which are like, 3 months down, they're like, oh, I got to get back to it. And so you went from 20 to like 30%. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to, cut it at the pass, where in June, July, we have all those people or people that want to come back and say, okay, you learned X, who has incorporated Y, and if not, why not, right? So that's going to be in June. And then in October is we're going to have kind of a revamp or like a revisit of how building smarter with AI, which is what was coined for that event, building smarter with AI technologies, strategies. And so we're trying to like do a 2-part approach in 2026 where, again, hey, smaller day, more condensed. We're going to bring in a couple speakers like Nick, like Brian, say, hey, this is what's going on. This is what we've seen as professionals in the AI space. What have you seen as contractors or trade or architects? And then let's get some homework done between July, August, September, and then come back in October to really see how you've advanced your businesses or your careers or how you've increased your efficiencies on your day-to-day basis, right? Like AI is supposed to help us to become more efficient. to save money on projects, to save time, right? So to be more efficient, to be better, to work smarter. And so that's what we're trying to do in 2026.
Beautifully said, Hugo. And if you're listening, so, Hugo and I are chatting. Today is March 3rd. This episode will probably drop, and I have to look at the schedule, like 6-ish weeks, let's say. So you'll probably be listening to this sometime like April or May. And if you still have time before that summer event, and then even more time to get your homework done before the symposium. And right, Hugo, maybe like late October, something like that.
That's what we're projecting right now. Yep, mid to late October.
And specific dates will come out, right? Follow the Metro New York IIBEC chapter for more details. But the point is there's time. And if you feel like you're behind, the fact that you're listening to the show and you're thinking about your AI strategy and how it can help your firm and you means you're probably a little bit further ahead than you expected. So please just look out for those events. Pay attention to Hugo's profile on LinkedIn and the chapter. And when the dates are set, you'll be the first to know.
You hit on the head, right? So no matter what you're doing, the golden nugget here, you're listening, right? So you're taking time out of your day to listen to podcasts like this. Definitely follow Nick, but just be curious, right? Yeah, nothing's really going to mess up if you're just kind of toying around with Gemini or ChatGPT or any of those platforms. I use it very minimal. I wish I could use it more. I think we can all wish we can use it more, but just use it. Right, like just do it, as Nike says. Just use it is what my theme would be for today, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hugo, and I would just implore, like, if you're listening, just come to the IIBEC event if you can make it in person, and we will literally show you just extremely basic use cases that you can put into practice today for about $20 a month, and that's powerful. And you can build from there. But Hugo, thank you again so much for taking the time to join us today. Last question for you, kind of builds off what you just said. Any closing pieces of advice for firm leaders that could do one thing to strengthen project outcomes, right? And when I heard earlier, right, so just get started, just do it, start using these tools, but anything else you'd like to close with?
So really, it's kind of how I try to incorporate different things in my daily life, whether it's personal or professional, is just start, right? The hardest part is just starting, and start small. Like, you don't have to rebuild your entire life to incorporate AI. It's just start little by little, get curious. I'm a big LinkedIn guy, as you know, Nick, and how it started a few years ago was just, let me just do one post a week. That's it. And that one post turned into a couple posts, then it turned into podcasts, and then it turned into articles, and then it turned into 14,000 followers, right? So it's not going to happen overnight. And if you just do it and use it and be curious, eventually you'll see the payback.
Really well said. And even as we get more and more sophisticated with technology, Hugo, nothing really beats, right? Human to human connection and consistency. That's what I heard.
Absolutely. Personal touch. We use these technologies to help us, but at the end of the day, why I think IIBEC works so well. Hey, we met through IIBEC, right? And I think how things work so well is it's that personal connection, that personal encouragement, and then AI to help flourish that relationship as well.
Beautiful. That's all about the people. But Hugo, thank you again so much for taking the time to join us today. If the audience wants to ask you a question or connect with you, right, maybe join the local IIBEC chapter, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Find me on LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn / Hugo Ramirez is my username there, my handle. Feel free. I'm on Instagram as well. But yeah, just DM me. And if you want to go to the IIBEC events, it's just Google IIBEC Metro Chapter. So IIBEC Metro Chapter. It'll pop up. We have events all throughout New York City, all throughout the year, whether it's fun like golf outing or, AI technologies coming up in July and October. There'll definitely be something for you if you're in the building and closure space. Thank you, Nick.
Hugo, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, my man.
Thanks, Nick. Have fun.
Please remember, you can find the show notes for this episode at aectechpodcast.com. There, you'll find a summary of the key points discussed in today's episode, as well as links to any of the resources, websites, or books mentioned during this episode. Until next time, I wish you the best in all your engineering and technology endeavors.